All right, we are back on the podcast where we are training men in spiritual fitness. My name is Evan McGinty, and I'm here with two of my very good friends, Andy Murray. Andy, how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, good, Evan. All the way from Scotland. Great to be here.
Excellent. Not morning where you are, morning where I am, afternoon where you are, bright and sunny.
Just afternoon, just afternoon.
Just afternoon. And also, we got Joe Barnard. Joe, how's it going?
Doing well, doing well. Yeah, just a great Friday. So looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Glad to be back together and to be talking all things men's discipleship with you guys. We're kicking off a new series right now. I think if I were to summarize kind of the main topics we talk about here on this podcast over time, if you kind of track them over time, you could probably put it in three categories. It's either going to be like spiritual disciplines, spiritual friendship, or spiritual mindedness. I feel like we're always kind of hovering around those three topics. And I think it's great. They work out well and it's stuff that guys need to engage in. But this new series is going to go around that last one. It's that idea of spiritual mindedness. And I hope to set guys up to think about their thinking. What are we thinking about? And how do we control our emotions? So if you're the kind of guy who struggles with anxiety or despair, you're really going to enjoy this series. This series is for you. And we're inviting actually a fourth person to join us during this series, a fourth guy, another friend, a guy named Richard Baxter. If you don't know who Richard Baxter is, join the club, all right? I'm with you. But this is an old 17th century pastor, author. He authored 140 books. I looked this up, right? 140, that's insane. He authored 140 books, was a pastor back in the 17th century, and wrote a book called The Saints' Everlasting Rest. And so we're going to be kind of going through some of this book together as we think about how to pray like a Puritan. What does it look like to control your mind in such a way that you're able to think and meditate and have this spiritual mindedness? But I want us to kick off here. Obviously, this was not my idea. I mean, we're talking about a Puritan writer and a very puritanical idea. So this could have come from one of the two guys in Scotland. But Joe, this was you. So we've got this idea of spiritual mindedness. We've taken this old book that we're going to go through, but it's not even just that. We're hopping in at like chapter 11 or something like that of the book. We're not even starting from the beginning. So chapter 11 of a 16 chapter book. Catch us up on why this book, why Richard Baxter, what is this book all about? Get us caught up to chapter 11, and then let's dive in together.
All you need to know about this book is that Richard Baxter was dying. He's on his deathbed. He's only about 30 years old, so he's a young man. And ask yourself the question, what would you do if you feel like eternity is just, on the threshold? I'd probably maybe have the television on. I'd maybe be listening to the radio, listen to Spotify, whatever. Not Richard Baxter. Richard Baxter is writing an 800-page book about how to set your mind now so you're living a heavenly life even while you're still in the body. Now, he doesn't actually die, but he ends up publishing this book, and later on it gets shortened a little bit. But nonetheless, this is the notes of a man who already at 30 years old had trained himself in this ability to set his mind on the things above, even in the midst of really hard circumstances, even when he's physically ill and feeling like he's about to die. So whatever circumstances guys are in right now, this is something, if it helped him, it can help them too. In terms of where we're jumping in, he spends a long time trying to just convince guys that they should want to, first of all, go to heaven, to be with God. So a lot of it is a kind of rehearsal of the gospel. But we want to go toward the end because it takes up this how-to sort of practical mode of talking where finally he's speaking to the Christian. And he's speaking to the guy that really doesn't have a handle on his emotions. He doesn't have a handle on his mind. And he wants to train that individual in this art of spiritual mindedness. And so it's guys like us, guys that are not good at meditating or contemplating, that feel distracted by life, more concerned about, the needs of today than eternity. Guys just like us are being trained by Richard Baxter in the art of living a heavenly life on earth. And so this is really practical, really helpful for guys. And so we're going to get to the chapters that really, where he begins to explain the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, and our aim over the course is, yeah, to train one another how to pray like a Puritan, how to pray like Richard Baxter, this guy that was on his deathbed, at least thought he was on his deathbed, and thought, okay, let me do everything I can to control my mind, set my mind on the things that are above. So we want to set guys up for doing just that. And Baxter talks a lot about living a heavenly life here on earth. So beginning now to think and set your mind in such a way that you are living a heavenly life here on earth. Andy, I want to ask you, what do you think Baxter means by that? Living a heavenly life on earth. I mean, I'm hoping what you're going to tell me is that what he means is that I get to just drop my job, quit everything, leave all my stuff behind, go live in the woods somewhere and just pray and live like a monk. Like, can I just go live the Amish life and just drop everything, quit everything, and go off? Is that what Baxter means by living a heavenly life on earth?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Good. Oh, thank you. This is why I want you on this podcast. Thank you. All right, done. We can move on. Everybody quit your jobs and move out, become Amish. Yes, you've heard it here.
The one thing I'm not going to do is go and live in the woods of Louisiana with you, Evan, because there's too many alligators there. So,
True. And mosquitoes.
Yes.
no, I think what Richard Baxter is getting at in this book is that we live our lives in the real world, but we live in the light of eternity. Um, and I think when we live in the light of eternity, we have a peace of mind, we have a rest in our souls, because we're living in the light of eternity. I think when heaven is our focus, earthly troubles lose their power to crush us, because we're living in the light of eternity. Um, I think the other thing is when we look to eternity, um, our hope is in a lasting, eternal comfort, not in the fleeting comforts of this world. Um, and that's why we're able to take a very different view of sin. Sin offers us a fleeting pleasure, a fleeting comfort, momentary pleasures of sin. But I think when we look at sin in the light of eternity, we're able to have a power to resist it in a different way. Um, I think also Baxter's book is helps us to look towards eternity in terms of um, the comfort we can receive as we go through sorrows in this world. Um, we experience loss, we experience suffering, and in the light of eternity, we're able to take the long view in those things. And I think also we have a different anchor when we are people of God, when we are um, people who look to eternity, where our joy is anchored in eternity. It's not anchored in the temporary things of this life. It's not anchored in the fleeting joys of sin. Um, I think the hope of heaven functions like the ballast of the ship. It steadies us through the storms.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, if we want real comfort in this life, we need to take the eternal view.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the motivation here for him is that idea of setting your mind on eternity is, well, what is in eternity? It's God. Ultimately, he's trying to get how do we focus our minds on God? And I love one of his quotes: "A heart set upon heaven is a heart that's set upon God." So, what does it look like to live a heavenly life upon earth? It's focusing your mind, your attention on God. A heart that's set on heaven is a heart that's set on God, therefore. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of what he's kind of training us to do is set our minds there in that place and with the person of God. So then, all right, I want us to get into kind of some of the what's talked about in this specific chapter. Guys that have followed cross training for a little while, maybe even been through our CT12 program. They're used to Colossians chapter 3. It's part of, the CT12 challenge is trying to help you to break your bad habits and establish some new good habits and routines in your life. And as part of that, you memorize and meditate on Colossians chapter 3, part of which talks about setting your mind on the things that are above. And Joe and Andy, you've probably had that experience of guiding men through discussions around that verse, of setting your mind on the things that are above. And sometimes guys have the question, okay, I understand, but like, what does that look like? How do I do that? How do I begin to set my mind in the day to day on the things that are above? And so Baxter's going to get to some of that in the coming chapters. But right now in this chapter, what he's really trying to do is motivate guys to do such a thing and trying to convince us, hey, if you would set your mind on the things that are above, there are actually benefits in your life. There's actually great reason for you to become the kind of man that sets your mind on the things that are above. So he lists like I think 12 different benefits of why we should do this. We're not going to go through all those, but I do want to pull a few of them out and maybe toss them out to you guys and just get some commentary from y'all. So let me start with you, Joe. One of the benefits that he says, one of the reasons he's trying to convince us to set our minds on things above is he says that this is the highest excellence of Christian temper. So would you agree with that? And how would you explain that to guys?
We often live a sub-Christian existence. We're just as fearful as the world is. We're just as anxious. We're just as short-sighted. And we see in the Bible, this plagues not just like the ordinary, but even the extraordinary believers of the past. You look at someone like, Abraham, who wanders into Egypt and pawns off Sarah as his sister. He's filled
Yeah.
with fear. He's not filled with faith. But then there's these moments where people actually live according to truth, and it's amazing. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they're going to be thrown in the fiery furnace, and they're just not worried. They know God can save them. He might not, but he can. Or again, where Abraham's willing to offer up Isaac because he believes if God wants to raise him from the dead, he can. And there are these moments where people stand out because they're not living by the sort of changeable circumstances around them, but they're actually living according to eternal, unchanging truth. And when you see a man who really believes and has bought into heavenly truths, and those have actually affected his mind, his heart, his attitude, he looks like a giant among men. And it's not because he's special, it's just because he's living authentically according to these truths. And so Baxter's saying, hey, do we want that highest temper? Then we got to set our mind on the highest things.
Yeah, he's saying, look, that the ideal man, the ideal Christian man, the man you want to become, the man you're aimed at, he's the kind of man who sets his mind on the things that are above. So if you can become the guy who is training your mind to think about heavenly things, to set your mind on things that are above, you will become that ideal man that you've pictured in your mind. That's the pathway is setting your mind on the things that are above. So yeah, that's one of the benefits here. The ideal man has the ability to set his mind on things that are above. Another one, Andy. He says that this is the nearest and truest way to a life of comfort. So you want a life of comfort? Well, the nearest and truest way is to set your mind on the things that are above, to have heavenly mindedness, as he calls it.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that verse when Joe was talking about Abraham in Hebrews 11, for he was looking forward to the city that has foundations,
Hmm.
whose architect and builder is God. Faith gives us that eternal perspective to see that which is not seen.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of the nearest and truest way to a life of comfort. I mean, when we look at the Bible and we see men and women of God, we don't often see lives of comfort. Um, I think of Moses. At age 40, he had all the comforts of Egypt, the comforts of the palace. But it says later on in that chapter in Hebrews 11, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose to suffer with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. But he considered reproach for the sake of Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, since he was looking ahead to the reward. There's a very famous sermon in J.C. Ryle's book Holiness about that verse and just what Moses had to give up. But ultimately, when we take the eternal perspective, when we take the faith perspective, what we see in men like Moses is that they ultimately suffered in the short term, but ultimately they did have a life of comfort because they believed in God, they trusted in God.
Hmm.
And I think, as I was saying before, it's that perspective of lasting comfort versus fleeting comfort. I think which the Puritans talk a lot about. Um, Earthly comforts will fade. Um, heavenly heavenly mindedness offers us that deep and lasting joy that the world cannot take away from us. And Moses went through many many trials, but ultimately he knew that eternal comfort. Um,
Yeah.
yes, I think what sin tries to do is it tries to distract us. As we were saying last week at our men's weekend, we were talking about precious remedies against Satan's devices, and we were saying how Satan shows us the bait, but he hides the hook. And so often in life, we grab hold of that little shiny bait, and we find Satan has got us by that hook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when we fasten our heart on heaven, when we fasten our heart on eternal things, we have that lasting and eternal joy.
I think
Yeah.
one thing
So,
to throw in too is the way that Baxter, we're going to see this, that he actually believes that when you're in a low place of sorrow, there's comfort there that you can, in a sense, embrace if you're willing to.
mm,
But it takes some effort. And so, for example, here's a little statement he makes: God's Spirit works our comforts by setting our own spirits at work upon the promises and raising our thoughts to the place of our comforts. You've got to do the work of grabbing hold of the promise, which will lift you to the comfort, but it's not where you are if you just let your natural weight of your own kind of worries and concerns hold you down. And so
mm.
there's effort. Repeatedly, you're going to hear Baxter saying there's something we have to do in order to have this life.
But that it's worth it. Yeah, that's his whole pitch here. Is look, it's worth it if you will put in the effort of setting your mind on these things. That even in those times of struggle, and if you'll set your mind on the power, the grace, the mercy of God, all of these things, the heavenly things, then yes, you can get to that place of comfort, as you're saying. And Andy, you kind of already talked about one of the other benefits that he mentions here, and interested to see if you'd have any more to add there, because he says one of the benefits is that a heart that's in heaven protects us from temptations to sin. So you mentioned that a little bit already. I wonder if you had any more to add to that, that a heart in heaven protects us from the temptations to sin.
Yeah, I think there's a little overlap between Baxter and Brooks here, his book Precious Remedies.
Hmm.
When we look at the weight of eternal glory, we see the cheapness of sin, don't we? Um, One of them says, "Why trade a crown for a trinket?"
Hmm.
Um, so I think the heart in heaven helps us to see how poisonous sin is. Sin loses its sweetness for us, because we see how damaging it is. We see how temporary it is, and we see how it offends our holy God. But I also think that a heart in heaven, um, it builds resistance against temptation. When heaven gets a grip of our affections, the world cannot easily deceive us. Um, if our destination, if our mission is heaven, I think it builds resistance in us in terms of temptation while we're here in this world.
Hmm.
Um, and I also think a heart in heaven, it gives us a perspective in terms of temptation. I was saying when we were talking about precious remedies against Satan's devices, I was talking about how David lingered, King David lingered in terms of temptation, but Joseph fled.
Hmm.
You remember Joseph in Potiphar's house? Potiphar's wife tried to grab hold of him to commit adultery, and Joseph fled. And it led to Joseph being in prison for maybe up to 12 years. But he trusted in the promises of God. He believed in God. And that fleeting temptation, he fled from it. So I think, a heart in heaven gives us a perspective in terms of temptation.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
if your heart is in heaven, if your mind is in heaven, then it's also not on temptation. It
yeah,
can't be two places at once. So that's part of what some of his argument here is like, hey, there's no room for idleness if you will set your mind on the things that are above. If you will be heavenly minded, there is no room for idleness, which is where temptation creeps in. So if you allow your mind to just be idle and you go where it may, well, as men, we know that's often not good. So, hey, if you will discipline yourself, put the effort in to be the kind of guy who sets your mind intentionally, become heavenly minded, then there's no room. You leave little room for temptation to creep in. Joe, another one of the benefits that he gives would be that a heart in heaven feeds our motivation to godliness. What did you think about that section?
This is something that sports science is familiar with now. Anybody who's training for a serious level of athletics is told to actually meditate on success,
Hmm.
to actually imagine oneself at the finish line on the podium, because that it feeds this, it stirs the heart so that the not fun, the duty, the waking up early and going for another run or sitting in the gym, shooting baskets again, you're willing to do it because you don't lose sight of what it's all about. And it's the same system we use spiritually. Um, he makes this comment, we run slowly and strive so lazily because we so little mind the prize.
Hmm.
If you really grab hold of, I mean, it's pretty incredible. You couldn't imagine anything better than the hope that's held out in front of us in the Bible. It's everything we dream of, magnified a millionfold. And so how does that not motivate us? It's not the goodness of the prize that's lacking. It's just the fact that we don't pay any attention to it.
Yeah.
And what happens if you don't pay attention is you forget. So if you don't want that to happen, meditate on the promises, and then all of a sudden you're going to find a lot more motivation to godliness.
It's great. Look, I find great motivation in these benefits myself. I do want to become the kind of guy who is setting his mind on things that are above, to become the kind of guy, as Baxter calls him in his language, a heavenly minded guy. I love this idea. I love the benefits that you guys have outlined. But I think the obvious next question is, how do we do it? How do we begin to become men in the modern world who are heavenly minded? Men with families, with careers, with busy lives all around us. How do we begin to train ourselves to set our minds on heavenly things? And that's what we're going to cover in the coming episodes. So we hope that you found in this one great motivation to see that this is worthwhile. This is something that's worth pursuing. This is something that is achievable. But over the next few episodes, you're going to see, okay, how do we begin to do that? And we're going to continue reading through Richard Baxter's book, The Saints' Everlasting Rest. If you want to follow along with us, we did chapter 11 this week. We're going to be doing the next few chapters, just one at a time over the coming weeks. So you're welcome to grab a copy and follow along. But any final words from either of you guys as we close this out and head to our next episode over the coming weeks?
Yeah, I like what Joe was saying just about the sight of the finishing line, how it inspires us, encourages us, and I just also think of others who are running the race that are flagging, and we encourage them to say the finishing line's just round the corner, and I think people who are heavenly minded, they inspire other believers, don't they, to be more heavenly minded and um, to reach for the prize of the high calling of God.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So join us on the journey. We're all going to learn how to pray like a Puritan. I hope you will enjoy the next few episodes and set your mind on the things that are above. We'll see you next time.